Welcome back to Fortunate Fishes. My guest today is a guy named Chris Shonk, and the reason I wanted him on is because he's lived like 4 lives in one. He grew up the oldest of 8 kids, started his first business at 14. He joined the Army at 19, went into the special ops world, and in 1996, the U.S. Army named him Special Operations Soldier of the Year out of every soldier in the entire force. Then he gets out, becomes an analyst for Merrill Lynch, co-founds a private equity fund that's now sitting on $3.5 billion in real estate, sells this stake, opens up a chain of pawn shops, takes a gaming company public, and finally lands in Austin, where he co-founds a venture capital firm called ATX Ventures Partners, $500 million under management, 2 consecutive top quartile funds. And here's where it gets interesting. He's on the board of a company that the U.S. Space Force uses to track every object in orbit. He's funding AI privacy infrastructure, flying cars, the next defense industrial base, and he sees stuff that most people don't get to see. He started life selling things out of his parents' house at 14, so I wanted to talk to him about the through line, about what special ops teaches you, about what's going on in space right now that we're not being told, that we're being lied to about AI, China, Austin, and he has an amazing wife whose last name is Garcia, so you know he's a good guy. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks. What an introduction. So my amazing wife, who is a former Garcia, she just brought me a coffee. So nice to have a little coffee and catch up with you, Charlie.
You're in Crested Butte out in Colorado, but you're also in Austin. How do you do that with 2 young kids?
A lot of coordination. I mean, one thing is resources, the availability of resources or the lack of availability of resources dramatically change one's options into how they navigate life. The ability to have the capabilities to move around with kids easily and jump on planes and, different derivatives of planes and things like that allow you to not have to choose.
And I figure that when you were in a family of 8, you didn't have all those amenities.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, basically, I grew up as a wee shared family, 8 kids, expat. There was never enough to go around. And I was like, all right, well, one day I want to be on the other side of this thing where the answer is yes. The question is, where are we going? What are we doing? And who's going to be there? And so that's kind of the construct of how I've tried to put my life together, and then met my partner, Myrna Garcia. And she grew up with a father who was a policeman, a mother who was a teacher, kind of traveling around. And she's the youngest, so nothing, it's the exact opposite end of the spectrum. So, but we had unified vision of the world we wanted to live. We're both adventure seekers. We're both very philosophical and open-minded, and we both wanted to have a family and kind of provide our family that perspective as the ultimate gift.
Well, look, you sit on the board of Slingshot Aerospace. Your company builds the eyeballs that watch every orbit and object in space. You got contracts with NASA, the Air Force, the Space Force. But in plain English, what's actually up there right now that the public has no idea about? And are we already in a war in space?
Yeah, so this has been going on for quite some time, right? And I'll kind of walk through how we got to this investment, because it was very thoughtful. And this kind of company came up on literally those stories you hear, back of a napkin. Instead of a bar, it was Starbucks. I'm an old military guy, used radios, did Morse code, satellite shots. You move around, and in the military, you say you've got to shoot, move, and communicate. Those are the 3 things you've got to do. So communication to me has always been fascinating, right? Whether it was, carrier pigeons, speed of a horse, messages on boats, wigwag, which is like, can you see somebody? Even the lighting of beacons across mountaintops, like the ones behind me. There was a company we invested in with my actual prior co-founder from the video game company we took public. Right. So again, you build these networks of people, and know each other's strengths, know each other's weaknesses. We call it getting the band back together. And he had built a company, he co-founded it. Both co-founders are friends, and they're investors in my fund. They built a company called Alert Media. And that was the device agnostic way to communicate terrestrially, so on the ground. If there was spoiled yogurt in a truck, boom, everybody has to know, whether it's computers, CB, mobile phone, computer, get it out of there. If there was a hurricane coming, if there was a sniper on the roof, if there was a forest fire, how does everybody, in a blanketed way, regardless of what kind of device they have for comms, understand what's going on? So that company was Alert Media, and that was the best that could be done with the technology available at the time. And then after we sold that company, and that returned about 1.5 times my whole fund, we made 25 millionaires out of that company, $1 billion plus company. We said, all right, well, after that, now what's next? And so you're sitting around kind of having that beer, that post excitement beer. And we said, well, let's do something either to clean up the ocean, or let's do it up there. Let's go up. And so at that time, space really started to become increasingly congested. It wasn't just governments and a handful of sort of legacy big telecom companies. It was
Right.
all kinds of stuff. And they didn't have a way there was no rules of engagement. There was no FAA. There was no awareness around what's next to me. Is it owned by a government? Is it space debris and junk? Is it active, not active? Is it friendly, not friendly? What are its capabilities? And so, if you don't know what's around you, you can't maneuver. And so I love maps. I love compasses. I love orienteering. And that's the company we built. At the time, when you build these businesses or invest in them, it's looking at the opportunity and why is it early, late, or just right? And then what capabilities, because I'm a technology guy, are the actual type capabilities of the technology itself ready to dovetail to the market demand and opportunity? And so that was it. It was like, boom.
Last June, when the B-2 bombers left Missouri and they went all the way and dropped bombs on the nuclear facilities in Iran, the radars went they blacked out in Iran. Like they couldn't see anything. And what I'm hearing is that came from some sort of space satellite the US has that has that capability. It had never been used before.
That's right. Well, you get the same thing in Venezuela too. So the Space Force, it's not the Department of Defense anymore. It's the
Right.
Department of War, right? It's more of an active sort of
Yeah.
sort of term, right? And we have a new branch of the military, right? It's not Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. We have a Space Force, and I can tell you that Space Force is actively involved in these things. And what you talked about there, Charlie, that was a coordinated effort, and the Space Force is a material part. I mean, we're talking big budget, lots of technology, really the forward stuff.
Are they headquartered out in NORAD, or where's the headquarters?
There's different places around, but they're the big headquarters is in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, that's where I went to school. They have more like Christian organizations there than any other part in the world, and now they got Space Force. So something is definitely going on. And I think also one of my favorite books, Atlas Shrugged, when they all the smart people, they went into some valley in Colorado,
Gotta love Galt's Gulch. Yep.
Yes, that's it. But in fact, I'm going to this conference, and my wife's like, what hat do you want to wear for the golf game? And it was one of those Atlas Shrugged kind of, who is John Galt?
I love it.
But at the age of 19, most people go to college. You end up going into the Army, and you become the Special Operations Soldier of the Year 96 out of every operator in the entire force. The Army gave it to you. Like, what does a guy have to do to win that? And was there a single moment when you knew that you had earned it for something?
It's interesting. I have military on both sides of my family. It's goes way back. I had a grandfather who was in the Battle of the Bulge. I had a grandfather who was in 1812 on the other side. So it's just one of those things. It's not like a mandate, but it's strongly encouraged that in a big family, for example, for the 18th birthday, we got luggage. It was a very, here you go, you're 18, don't let the door hit you in the rear end, right? And so we literally got like
That's
luggage.
funny.
And so I kind of went out and I joined, and first thing they do is they give you a test, and that sort of is the mental capacity you have, and how does that map to the different needs of the military. And I did well on that, and they said, well, sky's the limit, and I was already kind of an athletic kid, and I was like, well, I want this combination of adventure, something that's fun for my body that I can do, some fun for my mind, and you're going to own me for 4 years. So I want the max benefit. I want to jump out of planes, scuba dive, blow stuff up, learn things like. And they said, all right, kid, well, if you want to do that, here's the road. It's not going to be easy, but it'll be worth it. And I just love a good challenge. I think like most entrepreneurs, tell them they can't do it or tell them it's hard, and it makes you even more excited about it. What I learned though about being in the special operations community is, when you start to raise your hand for that annual competition, it starts at a very cellular level, right? So like team, company, battalion, group, all the way up, and then the Rangers are doing it in different groups. So it is all going up the pyramid, if you will. Everybody there, I mean, especially in segments that I was in, everyone's in Mensa. Oh, like it's not like being in high school. Like, oh, you're the smart, gifted, and talented person. Everybody is. Oh, you're the one who's fit. Everyone is. You can do push-ups. You can run. Oh, you're a team player. Like you're literally surrounded by this 1% of 1% of 1%. And you realize pretty quickly you're not a unique snowflake. The world is very big, and the gifts that maybe got you to a certain level in your little microcosm, maybe you were clever or the strongest or the fastest or could solve problems. Well, everyone around you is in that camp. You're going to this competition. It's like, well, we're all expert shooters. 48, no edge there. All right, now it's the physical competition. Everybody's also fit. So really it was at the very end, it comes down to these a barrage of different kind of panels and board questions where there's just generals and sergeant majors and everybody's special operation. They're just giving you a curveball. Here's the situation. Here's the facts you have. Boom, what would you do? And there's no way to prepare. There's no read ahead. It's all timed. And they're just measuring your ability to rapidly, digest information, triage it, find gaps, think conventionally, think unconventionally, and then formulate some kind of a plan on the like spur of the moment, and then articulate that plan back to them. And that was where the edge really came. Now, later in life, I learned that that's the ultimate skill to be a venture capitalist and private equity investor, is to assess all the information, put it back together, find where there's some kind of alpha or, edge, and then assemble a plan and take action. And so it's kind of funny how I didn't even know what venture capital was when I was in the military, but that all lined up perfectly.
I'll bet. One of the things that it brought up is that, if you look at public companies in the US, it's US companies, then Chinese and Israeli. And Israeli they have such a small population. But one of the things is that before going to college, they spend 3 years in the military, 2 to 3 years in the military. So by the time they do go to college, they've already had that leadership experience. They know how to lead. They know about teamwork. They've done some pretty interesting things, as opposed to like just getting out of high school and let's go to college, let's drink and get drunk and whatever. They're a heck of a lot more serious, and everybody wants to get into cyber or something because they know that if they have that experience and then study computer science and get into AI, they're going to do really well in life. But I think that probably helped you a lot, having the military experience first, as opposed to going straight into college out of high school.
Yeah, for sure. And the nice thing about, another interesting fact about Israelis I've worked with is it's the men and the women. So you get the whole society, right? So now everybody has this sort of standardized chapter of growth, and they catch you from like 18 to 21. Right. So it's not only, it's all encompassing, it's both genders, and it's at a very formidable time in who you are as an individual and what the rest of your life's going to look like. I mean, Switzerland does something similar. They all get kind of trained and they go back, and then they can save all that money in GDP, right? Because they don't have this massive standing military. They just have a bunch of conscripts ready to rock and roll. And then they throw that back into their economy, right? So there's just different,
and your mom and dad has done it too. So like, it's the whole society. Like, I remember I was in the MIT Israel lab. So my wife and I would go to Israel for a month, and you're in like the supermarket and you see some like 19-year-old girl with an Uzi, just like shopping, and no one thinks anything about it, at all. It's like, if I go into Publix and I see some girl in the military with an Uzi strapped around her. It's like, no, we wouldn't see that. But,
Well,
you
you've done
know,
some interesting things, right? I mean, you go on this journey, and there's getting an education and like what that education does for your life. But I think really double clicking on what is an education, like what does that even mean? Like, is it personal growth? Is it exposure to academic information? Is it practical experience? Is it, friends and relationships?
it's mindset. I went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and I'll tell you the two most important things I learned. Three, actually. One, like before classes even started, this was when guys didn't type. We took shop and women took home ec. So we had 3 weeks of typing. You had to type 60 words a minute. I type today 120 words a minute, and I have a German mechanical keyboard. So I'm really fast. And then they taught us how to speed read because they said, look, um, you're going to be reading a ton of stuff. And if the guy next to you can read 3 times faster, it means he's going to finish his test. He's going to be at the bar picking up the cute girls before you get there. So it's serious. And I've been speed reading, and you have to have a 90% comprehension on anything that you read. You got to take a test after it. So imagine your brain since the age of 18, neuroplasticity of speed reading your entire life. I can read a book at 300 pages between a Miami to New York flight. And now with AI, being able to type really fast and read, and then leadership, knowing how to be behind, to inspire men and women, to not take credit for things, give credit to other people. I mean, you've built companies, started a business at 14, so you had the entrepreneurial gene, special ops at 19, pawn shops, taking a gaming company public, now flying cars, orbital warfare, from the kid selling stuff out of his house to the guy with a cap table on Space Force technology. What's the through line? What's the same job you've been doing the whole time?
That's a really good question. The same thing is really trying to find a huge secular movement, right? Like, where is there electrification, or, we just, the railroad got invented. We've only had the steam engine, or we had, speed of a horse, and now, or we could type, and now we can talk, and that we can talk to AI and I can type for us, right? Like some kind of brand new paradigm that's being unlocked for society at large. And then thinking through, like, pretty much all I read, um, is history and sci-fi. What actually happened? That's your sort of, like, if and from a science brain, there's your control. What actually happened? What are the facts, right? And then what could be? And then living between history and the potential future is a wonderful place to be. And then being surrounded by other innovators so that we're all having dialogue. Analog's great, but that's just you. That's you and your brain either reading or talking or listening or whatever. But this, even what we're doing right now, two guys having dialogue, clarifying questions, riffing on things. I mean, that compounded across multiple relationships and multiple mediums is just phenomenal. Especially, like you said, it's not just speed, it's retention. If you have both speed with retention and a network of relationships, whew, that's a formidable place to be to kind of figure out what's next. But my kids, we talk about, you joked about shop. That was one of the worst mistakes ever, is to like truly believe as a society that we all needed to be investment bankers or consultants, and you had to go to college and get a bunch of debt and don't take shop. Learning how to do real things. Because I can tell you, like, I live in the mountains right now. Any beach town, any mountain resort town, the guy that makes a ton of money that's got a great quality of life is the plumber, is the roofer, is the guy who can fix stuff, because
Yeah.
none of those guys know how to do it. All they can do is write a check and outsource it. And he's got guys like me. I mean, I can actually do it, but most guys are lined up, 10 weeks over. And they're, guess what? They're going to the same golf course as all of us guys who are private equity CEO types. And they're out there playing. Their kids are going to school. And guess what they did? They learned how to solve something with their hands and their brain. And everybody else only can outsource.
AI isn't going to replace them anytime soon. I was talking to a venture guy has a $300 million fund. I was saying that for AI, we need energy. And the US has so much natural gas that we're exporting it. So we have a definite advantage in AI. But he said, hey, we do have the natural gas, but we don't have the freaking natural gas turbines. And one of the problems, because he invested in a turbine company, is they can't find enough electricians in the US. They have to import electricians that
Wow.
they need that are very sophisticated for gas turbines for the natural gas to produce the energy for all the AI data centers. Electricians is the supply chain problem. But the other thing you said, I have a daughter who writes about the in between. And I've never heard before the in between of sci-fi and history. That's going to really stay with me. And it makes total sense. When I was a kid, I used to watch the Jetsons, and half of the stuff is now real,
You're right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Totally.
but I don't know if you our fellow R360 member Jeff Lampkin from Atlanta invited me, and I took my son to the hogs and helicopters. Had like Navy SEALs out there and a bunch of Green Berets, and they're teaching us how to shoot all kinds of cool weapons. And then we went up in helicopters to hunt hogs, because what else are you going to do in Texas? Uh, so I had fun, but then afterwards there was an auction, and I won this thing. One of my buddies that I got to meet was Rob O'Neill, and he's he's another Montana kid who did well for himself. The guy that one of the guys that shot Osama bin Laden. But I miss that. Do you miss that world sometimes? Like, all the at the high level and the stuff that you were doing.
I miss the people more than
Yeah,
anything. Just being around, I mean, that many smart, motivated, and there's the camaraderie, the kind of I've got your back. This is, I've got 10 to 2, you've got 3 to 5, like, just that whole that's just a special thing, right? And you can say that
uh,
about, maybe certain, chapters of college or just different things or a
right.
company you worked with. I mean, there's just something about the people that were special. I didn't like the sort of constraint upside. Like no matter what you do, you're paid as a staff sergeant with 4 years in. You didn't get paid for the risk and reward.
What's the hardest thing that you did that you can talk about?
I mean, the whole selection process and going through that was really, that was for somebody who'd never really, and I wasn't straight from Ranger Battalion and kind of all that stuff, right? I didn't have
Right.
that sort of, I didn't go to Ranger school first. So going through that, and then there's the individual stuff, and then there's the team stuff. And you have to do well at both, right? Can you be autonomous and just go out and make it happen? And then great, okay, you can either, that's binary, you can or you can't. And if you can you now do that as a we? And that ability to be a we, an effective we, and an effective me is really special. And not everybody's cut out for it, right? Like, I mean,
No.
there's people that can do both. I mean, they can do either, but not necessarily both. So I thought that was really hard, and that taught me a lot about myself. And it also was kind of like, you know, um, where after the military can you take it? Like I ended on a high water mark. Like, when I was in, what happened, the training I got, and then coming out, it was pretty much straight into 9/11, and the whole world changed. And I was in financial
Yeah.
services, right? So to be an investment banker post military on the heels of all that training and sort of, global situational awareness of things, and then be in a suit and tie in a capitalistic environment of dog eat dog versus, brother help brother. I mean, it was 180-degree in all ways. And so that was
Wow.
another amazing chapter, right? To kind of, but I miss the people. That's really what I miss. And having a family, I've got two young boys. You talked about your daughter. I love it. Like my kids, I mean, they know who Jules Verne is at 5 and 7. We talk about inventions. They know all the big industrialists. They constantly ask questions. I told them the most important thing they can do is ask a question, not take things for face value, but truly ask a question. And then we orienteer, we fish, we like make fish traps. They know how to read compasses. They know how to shoot
Wow.
azimuths at like
And
7,
how
right?
old
And
are how old are your boys?
5 and 7, they can do all this stuff, man. They know how to triangulate. They know how there's 360 degrees. They could shoot a mountaintop and do 180 and come back. Yeah.
Is there a little girl on the horizon, or is that ship sail?
Man, Myrna really wanted one. Two boys are a beat down, especially two like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, doer, physical, nonstop boys. Every time she sees a woman holding hands with a cute little girl and they're shopping or painting or doing something innocuous but fun, she's like, it's this like sentimental, I wish I could have one instead of like the wrestling beat down sort of messy.
And
you know, so
she keeps trying, she'll end up with 4 boys, and she'll be
that's
totally
what everybody we know that tried. That's what they got. Yeah, exactly.
right. So look, my first job in the military, before I went into, like, a lot of special ops stuff, because I was an idiot, when I got called by personnel, they're like, "Where do you wanna go?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a surfer, and anywhere there's an ocean, I don't care, put me there. No problem." Omaha, Nebraska, the headquarters, the Strategic Air Command, the furthest place in America from a beach. And my first assignment was, I was a China air defense analyst, where, think of B-52 bombers going in with nuclear weapons, and we had to make sure that the path was clear from air, uh, surface to air missiles. And now I'm thinking, China just put 1,000 satellites last year into space, 1,000. Russia's testing anti-satellite weapons. The Space Force is real. So are we ahead, behind, or kidding ourselves about what's going on now?
Man, that is a really good question. I have to be thoughtful, but a little careful how I answer some of this stuff. Being on the boards of companies like this with some very interesting investors, it makes for a little bit of a box around what I can say. But I will say this, where there's multiple players, in some ways we're late to the party and trying to play catch up. In other ways, we're early to the party. And there's not just one sort of arrow in the quiver that's going to make it happen, right? There's assets distributed at scale. There's benefit to that. There's capabilities, right? Just because you have a constellation doesn't really mean you have the capabilities. And then there's the ability to iterate and sort of layer cake functionality regardless of the situation to take care of it. So, for example, the meeting I had this morning, we've been long-standing investing in the other side of it, right? So in the military, you probably remember primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, PACE, everything. You go on a family trip, you're starting a company, what's your PACE? If this doesn't work, then what, then what, then what, then what? And primary is, get more birds in the sky, get them up there, get them up, get them up. There's still some constraint around launch. You can only get so many out there. Well, that's just going to create more problems and, and challenges. But I love the other side of it, right? If cords under the sea get cut, because that's how we get our internet. Internet's
Yeah.
gone, satellite's gone. Now what? Okay, that, now what? Okay, that, now what? So I spend a lot of time, I'm an old comms guy too. I love radio, right? Radio it's been around for a long time and it works.
I have a small walkie-talkie with a 5,000-mile range. It works, it pings off cell phones, but there's no chip in it. And I have a 4-year-old grandson who loves eagles. So I'm Eagle 1, he's Eagle 2. So before going to bed, he
It's
just
awesome.
gives me a call. And the other day he couldn't reach me because I was at an R360 meeting in Miami. So he was panicked that, like, something happened to him because he couldn't get me on the comms.
Oh my gosh. I love that. That's so cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. We have some walkie-talkies too. We always take them like backcountry with us because everybody's got their phones out. It's not going to work on the ski lift. And you're just like, boom, pull up that walkie-talkie. And they even know like the radio protocols. I love that you're Eagle 1 and Eagle 2. We don't have call signs yet. So that's kind of cool. But this whole thing of like it kind of goes back to what's old is new, you know, pace, and there's a right tool at the right time, right? So radio's good for certain things, and then there's
Right.
lasers that are good for certain things, and then there's cellular. I mean, it's just all very, very interesting. But I'm trying to navigate to how, as a family, as a commercial, all the different commercial things I have my hand on, the role we have in the government and how we engage with them as citizens and investors and operators. How do we just have, you know, capabilities regardless of the scenario to continue to shoot, move, and communicate, right? That's what it's all about, right? And then you can reframe it. I mean, it's not necessarily
Right.
shoot in a commercial or family environment, but it's, it's affect action of getting something done, right? So there's communicate, there's move, and then there's shoot. That could be like ship product. It could be make a
Right.
pizza. It could be hang a shingle, wire some cables, like whatever it is. That's the kinetic thing that is of value. And then there's where you are and your ability to do that kinetic thing. And then there's the communication, right? So I reframe the verb, that word shoot into whatever kinetic thing it is that your superpower is, right?
So let me ask you, just I'm curious. You ran a chain of pawn shops, Easy Money Pawn for years. What did running pawn shops teach you about America that no business school could ever teach you?
Wow, great question. I fell in love with the pawn shop industry um, in grad school. So in the military, you probably remember this, you go to a military base and there's always a couple of things around the military base, right? There's these pawn shops that are there. There's probably some like bars and strip clubs and stuff. And then um, those are two things you can kind of count on. And they were really like a tick on the back of an
Right.
organism, right? They were this affliction on soldiers because you get sideways, you need a little money, it's the 27th of the month, you don't get paid till the first. And they would just extort people. And I was like, well, they're solving a gap. They're kind of like these hard money lenders, right? But it was so expensive that a lot of people couldn't get themselves out of it. And I had troops around me. I had to counsel around like, hey, like here's how you budget money. Like maybe think about this. And I just thought, well, they exists. The industry exists because there's a problem. There's a customer with the problem. Is there a better way to do it? And then when I did the case study in grad school, this is, early 2000s, right? After the dot-com bust. And we had the internet. And we
Yeah.
had, the Blackberries were just about ready to come out. I mean, they just came out actually. And so it's like, hey, there's new technology. There's a legacy market that's inefficient and not optimized. And so what I did is I said, all right, this could be an Xbox. It could be a box of tools. It could be anything, right? Some physical thing. And the pawn shops will lend, they call it LTV. They'll lend at a certain value. So if I could sell this right now to anybody walking down the street, say it retails for 1,000 brand new, I could sell it to somebody for $500, no questions asked. I'll loan 250 at it, right? So I'll give a quarter of its retail, half of its salvage value, and you can do that all day long, right? And then I'm going to charge an
Right.
interest rate, and if you pay me back, great. I made a great interest rate. Here's your thing back, right? Your ring, your family jewels, like your lawnmower, bike, whatever, right? Or if you don't pay me back, that's okay too, because I'm in for 250 and I can sell for 500. So it was an industry where you couldn't lose. And I was fascinated by this industry if you can't lose. And it was also kind of the original neobank, right? So this is before a lot of these like fintech companies existed. It was a
Right.
neobank for the underbanked, so not R360 members, right? Think of the other world, right? The other side of society out there. It's a very real side of society, and they don't have a lot of the access to things. They still have to solve this problem. And so I was like, wait, there's a huge market. That market's growing. It's been solved in an arcane way without technology that really is not optimized for the end user. And how can I do it different? So I went out and I reached out to the top 10 pawn shops that were publicly traded that had the most scale. I talked to half the CEOs, and they actually talked to me, right?
So what'd you say? Like, I am a grad student. I'm writing a paper and I want to talk to you.
Yeah. So in fact, there's a lot of power in that. So,
Yeah.
it's like I was like, hey, I'm a grad student. So I'm a learner and I'm not a competitor. I'm not calling you. I'm not from McKinsey. I'm not some analyst. I'm a student, as harmless as one could be, right? I
Right.
just did your case study. So not only am I a student, I read about you. So there's a little bit of an ego stroke there. And
Right.
I'm fascinated about your industry. And I just would love 15 minutes of your time. Half those people responded to me favorably, got their admin on it, and booked me a meeting. And I was like, hey, look, I'm in Austin, Texas. I'm a tech guy. I love the pawn shop industry. What are you doing with e-commerce? Do you have an ERP? Do you have a CRM? And it was no, 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 no. And I was like, holy smokes, these big giant pillars of the industry are still waiting. They're still advertising in the back of a phone book. They're waiting on somebody to walk in and walk over and pick a guitar or a bike or an Xbox that's collecting dust And that's their constraint. And I was like, they need to be listing things on eBay. They need to know exactly who's coming in their store. They need to track all those customers. They need to have a CRM. They need to track their different pawn shops. I even asked them, I was like, hey, you have a chain of pawn shops. You're huge. Like, how many Xboxes do you have in a city at any given time? And do you even redistribute inventory across your stores? And the answer was no. And that was it. I got one of them who was, ex CEO of a huge one, and he was older. He knew more. He was a godfather of pawn shops, really, one of the
Right.
guys, but he could barely operate his iPhone. Right. And so I'm like, look, I can bring some tech people in to just absolutely turbocharge stuff that like the back of your hand. And so we created the very first centralized inventory management system. We started listing things online with that same tech team. We developed our own CRM to know who the different customers were and where they lived and kind of profile them. So then we knew if we saw Pedro or Bob, 5 times already and they lived three blocks away, we could loan them more money against their wedding ring or whatever because they're going to come back, right? And so it's like all this data took our business, and these are all publicly traded companies. We were
Right.
here. All of our KPIs were 10x better. Inventory turns, margins, everything. And so we did that. All the money started flowing to us. Everybody started, it was just this machine where we then started to gobble up other mom and pop operators that didn't have that technology, that scale. And, it's arbitrage, right? So we were just out there. It's like, boom, I'm buying you for $1.5 million. You're worth 5 million within like 90 days.
I didn't know that's what you were doing.
Yeah. Everything I do has a tech lever. It's not just like refinance it with lower cost capital.
What were the major insights that you then learned that you took with you everywhere else from that experience?
So you kind of got here with your initial question, and I love it because I didn't fully answer it. Is I am the common man, right? Like I love real people. And then R360 is great, but me in some of these meetings, I love throwing a wrench into it and like, hey,
Yeah.
let's not get too soft over here, right? Like everything you have could be taken away. Just look at history, right? So like let's create some resiliency and some perspective here. And I think R360 is really good at that. But you go outside of that, and there's a lot of people that are not prepared. They've lost their way or they gotten too comfy, right? And so what I loved about pawn shops is we were doing it better. We were the original neobank to people that were largely underemployed, immigrant, sort of, that sort of world. And we're it's the United States. We're all immigrants at some point. Like you pull on
Yeah.
that thread, like we're a nation of immigrants. And with that comes diversity, perspective, resilience, self-motivation, all that stuff. And so also in that world where we decided to launch heavily in Phoenix. So we went to market. The pawn shops do really bad. I mean, they do really well when things are bad. So the place to be at that point in time was Phoenix, Las Vegas, Southern Florida. They got, they were just, havoc was wreaked on them from the GFC, all those mortgages and stuff, right?
Right.
And so you had to speak Spanish to work in our pawn shops. And so it reminded me of my military days. Like here's real people with real problems. And that was also the growth demographic in the United States, right? Was the Hispanic growth. Like that was where the growth was. So
Right.
two things came out of that changed my life. That whole pawn shop journey and working with a largely Hispanic day laboring sort of demographic, right? Is like on the customer base. One is I married a Garcia, right? So I'm like my kids are half Latin. My whole family is like half Latin.
But wait a minute. Don't tell me that you go to Myrna's father to ask for her hand in marriage. Like, what does this guy do? It's like, oh, he runs pawn shop.
Well, no, I think what it was is, I just wasn't like this MBA. I mean, at the time, I'd
Right.
already had a couple exits, right? And so, like, it's like, hey, here's this gringo dude. He's, got a fancy car. Like, what's he? What he's like? Remember, this guy's he's a retired detective, like, right? His wife's a
Right.
librarian teacher, and it's like, look, this is a real guy. This is a real guy from a good family. He's going to take care of my wife. He's going to raise good grandkids for me. He's not some privileged, like no skills, sort of, speaks in sophistry, kind of guy. And I think that was great. But the other thing too is one of my best investments I ever made is I was first check into Siete. If you know that company, right? Like the gluten-free chips and salsa and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And what I saw is I was like, wait, this Hispanic thing is real. Some huge growth population. I also had a couple friends who were gluten intolerant or celiac. And I was like, if this gluten intolerant thing is real and Hispanic movement's real, I want to bet on two of those things simultaneously. And that was 152x. I got
Wow.
152x. They sold that company to Frito-Lay, and I was first checking it. But I would have never paid attention to it because I would have been blind, just like all the other professional investors were. They're like, you guys didn't come from success. You didn't go to the right schools. What's this Spanglish brand? Who cares about gluten? People eating Doritos all day long. They didn't know because they weren't paying attention. So that was awesome.
Wow. Let me ask you something about, 'cause I was looking into everything that's going on in the rebuilding of the military industrial base. You know, Anduril, Palantir, Slingshot, Shield AI. Private capital is rebuilding the defense industrial base in real time. And the question for me is private capital saving the Pentagon or is the Pentagon corrupting private capital?
It's funny. The conference, the conference I just got back to had a bunch of people running around. We're talking about this. A little bit of both. I mean, the U.S. government needs the private sector for
Yeah.
sure. That's how we catch up, especially China. I mean, Russia's its own thing, and there's different countries, but it's really China. They have the people, they have the resources, they can move unilaterally, and they took action in some regard in different ways ahead of us. And if we're playing a bit of catch up,
It's the incestuous congressional thing where if you got to build thing, you got to be in 30 different congressional districts. And you see, we're getting our ass kicked with, $5,000 drones that Iran has built. And,
yep.
we got to shoot them down with a $5 million missile, which is ridiculous.
Totally. Well, and there's a whole like that for the longest time we were a not in my backyard mentality,
Yeah.
right? Like no one wanted the things that we actually needed in their backyard. Could be energy, could be some kind of capabilities. We didn't even want shop, so we forgot how to do that. We don't have the electricians. Like the pendulum swung so far over here to comfort and white collar and not in my backyard. And guess what? Now we need that stuff when we're playing catch up. And you can't get there. It's not like FDR and the New Deal, and going out there and just laying that infrastructure. You have to have the commercial sector too, the private sector. So those two are there, but they're also clouding things. So for example, I go to the space symposium every year in your, old stomping grounds, Colorado Springs. And it used to be 80% uniforms,
Yeah.
20% suits. It's the inverse now. 80% suits, 20% uniforms, right? And really a lot of the events and parties and different things are the service providers. So the service providers, so think the consultants, the lawyers, the accountants, the investment bankers, they don't come until there's a deal to be done. So there wasn't service providers before because you had military and you had capabilities providers, and they would meet up, right? Well, now you got everybody, right? And so that shows the maturation, but also, and I know you're really good at mapping trends and laying on
Yeah.
some interesting trades. There's a ton of slop in the system. So as a ex uniform wearing, long time critical capabilities, defense, space, infrastructure investor, right? There is what I would call tourists, right? Would be a little bit more derogatory, or
Yeah.
new people to the arena would be a little less derogatory, but they are just paying up. They're mapping trends. They're moving fast. Like there will be, like any zeitgeist, a consolidation and correction. Like in many ways, there's deals I've passed on for very apparent reasons. Like you get anybody who knows what they're doing, and they're like, here's the three things they haven't thought about, or three things that are wrong. And then that company will go raise money from some fund, a bunch of family offices. There'll be an SPV floating around, and they all did a deal we wouldn't have done. And they paid more than we would have paid even if they had those three things right. So that'll sort itself out. But I just say there's a lot of slop in the system that's now starting to enter, like anything. I mean, compute has the same thing. There's a whole like wave of stuff that happens. People flood into those highlights because they're all reading the tabloids and what's going on.
Right.
And then you have to think about repercussions and where the real constraints are. And then some smart people come back in later and clean it all up.
Demystify for the listeners the AI surveillance war. So Anthropic came out with this new LLM and it was so good that they're like, no, 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 we can't give it out. And now like banks have it in
Mm-hmm.
advance so they can start doing like defenses. Protopia AI builds privacy preserving infrastructure for enterprise AI. Translation for the audience: who is stealing what right now and from whom?
So one of my favorite companies. So, I mean, it's not like kids where you love them all equally, right? There's definitely companies
Right.
where I have a very active board seat and I'm constantly thinking and traveling and talking and doing things with them. In the world of AI, there's really two big deals to solve. Like I love choke points, like bridges that must be crossed and or destroyed, right? And in AI, if we all want this AI world
Right.
and we can all benefit from it, and this will come back to answer your question, but the two big things that will become that will be a choke point and that are power for compute and inference. You got to have the power. You got to have the compute needs the power. So there's a whole power dynamic, which is actually an interesting place to invest right now. That's a whole other conversation. And then there's data privacy. And the more regulated the industry, so think government, financial services, healthcare. Those are places where there's lots of data that just wants to use AI, whether it's an LLM or just co-tenant compute or whatever, right? And the economics of it. So you're either going to have the CISO, which is the person in charge of the data and the security for an organization, say, we'd love AI, but this is government stuff, can't do it. Or we'd love to use AI for this, but it's financial services and we can't have people's social securities and how much money they make sloshing around. Or it's for to make medicine better or care providing and, clinical stuff, but there's a lot of personal health stuff. I mean, some of the most hacked places are healthcare, right? Because there's so much personal data there that you can just take out and go extort people, right? So those are highly regulated industries, and privacy is the thing to solve because you're not going to leverage AI unless you can make sure the data is private if you're in one of those big industries, right? And
Yeah.
so that's where I focused. I was like, look, I want to focus on data privacy because the dreams and hopes of AI can't come true for commercial enterprises unless that data privacy is immutably addressed. And then the
Yep.
other side is I want to invest in things that drive down the cost and improve the economics for running compute, because otherwise the price is like anything, right? When the first video game console came out, or the first, pick it, it could be anything, right? The car, it comes out as priced here, well, you can only address 10% of the market. You're too expensive. If you can bring the cost of whatever new product down, now you've expanded that market. And so I'm long AI. I think it's amazing. I think it's going to change the world, and it is changing the world. But if we can't solve data privacy, and if we can't make the economics and the cost to enter less, we're going to hold ourselves back.
Yeah, and AI is like five different layers. So I'm long AI, but certain layers. I want to go back to what you said at the beginning, which was energy. So energy is my longest core, like the largest oil and gas company in Canada. C&Q is my largest holding, then Exxon, then Chevron, Chenery, which is all the natural gas. If you look at Warren Buffett, 25% of his portfolio, even though he's chairman now, is energy. The last thing he did before leaving as CEO is he bought more Chevron right before the war, right? And it's just spitting out cash, and
Yep.
it's only like 5% or less of the S&P 500, and people don't realize it's not only energy. Nuclear's some years away, but even companies like Rolls-Royce, which is another company I follow, they're building nuclear modular, the smaller. Most people don't know that like aircraft carriers can go forever because they're run by nuclear, and it's clean now, it's safe.
Totally.
But there's a lot of bottlenecks in creating the energy that we need. Even a lot of the AI companies are buying Bitcoin miners because those miners are sucking up energy. They want that energy, so they're buying the miners. But what are you seeing on that energy kind of front? Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the private sector too.
Totally. I love this. I didn't know where this conversation was going to go. I forgot about that. That you had that energy, sort of expertise and some really good trades there. So as we go back to these choke points, right? It's really
Yeah.
peeling back the onion. And how I got into this whole thing is these other investments. But you're right. It's like the energy, and my dad's an energy guy. I
Ah,
grew up as an energy expat. He was a tech energy guy for Phillips, Conoco, and Chevron internationally, before horizontal drilling and fracking. Like when you had to go leave because we already got the U.S. oil that was
yeah.
easy, right? So you had to go to other places. But transmission is really important. So can you make it? Can you transmit it? Right. That there's a whole lack of transmission stuff. That's a whole other rabbit hole. And then like
Right.
on the making of side, whether it's nuclear or whether it's fossil fuel based or green, whatever. Magnets are really important. Well, we had a knot in our backyard thing. We don't have enough magnets running around. So I was an investor in Vulcan. They had a really nice transaction that, going on. So I'm investing in that stuff. Like you can't get here unless you can solve this. And I think you have to really understand, and people don't understand. They're trading and they're not really thinking through like what skill sets, raw materials, and production capability needs to exist to then do this, to do this, to do this, so that NVIDIA and pick your hyperscaler can continue to kick
Yeah,
ass.
no, they can't. They can't. The compute's not there. They're buying like 3 years ahead. But I want to change subjects because you have a portfolio company in Austin that actually builds single seat flying cars, lift aircraft, and they have a working machine. So when can I fly one?
You can fly one in Austin when you're there. Yeah, come check it out. In fact, some of the guys, I had some of the R360 guys flying around during South by Southwest, but they
Right.
do it right there, just by downtown at Auditorium Shores, just south of the river. You can go buzz around in that thing, and we've been flying people around for almost 2 years now. So there's a bunch of big public companies that still don't have human flights going on, right?
What did you see in that company? Why did you invest in it? And what do you see as the future looking at history and sci-fi? This is one of those sci-fi flying cars, George Jetson things.
So I saw it from a little bit of a different lens. So the founder and CEO was
Mhm.
one of the, dozen CEO founders back with me in Austin before Austin was a big deal. So we all had to go to California to meet our VCs. We were a college semiconductor, Dell, rock and roll capital. That was it. It wasn't this big metropolitan area with diversified entrepreneurship, right? And he had a company called U-Ship. So he was very early into the shared freight logistics world, right? So we
Okay.
just hit it off because we were both CEOs, of companies that, West Coast capital and solving problems in Austin. But he's also ex-NASA and he's a pilot. And, we just liked each other. Similar curiosities, right? And so he came to me one day and said, "Hey, look, technology is really getting interesting. I think this eVTOL sort of, self-flying industry is interesting. And I have a unique lens, right? I've built a venture-backed company with top-tier VCs. I'm a pilot. I'm an engineer, and you can build and do and do things now that you couldn't have done, right? The cost has come down to
Right.
experiment on some of these things. And so he's like, here's what I want to do. And so he kind of, mapped out, he said, kind of shared his vision. And I looked at it and said, huh, interesting. So he wanted to do it like, George Jetson, like this will be the way you won't have to sit in traffic. He looked at it from a user commercial, like, going across New York's water without having to, I mean, you can just see it, right?
Right.
And you can make them autonomous. You don't have to have the helicopter with the gas, with the pilot, with the, multi-million-dollar
Right.
CapEx. You can just racetrack these things autonomously or whatever, right? And they're selling them for personal use to like people in the Gulf and, billionaires and whatnot. But I looked at it and saw an interesting way to either drop off or pick up things where you didn't want a human pilot in the loop. So think Cashback, right? Like we've all had to do I need a jungle penetrator, exfil, this point. It's like you can help somebody get someone or something get out without having to put a human at risk. And you can put something in without having to put something in risk. And anyone else in the drone space was going small and mesh and no payloads. They were going cheap destroy it, get another one, destroy it, get another one, no payload. And I just love, I mean, I'm not a contrarian. I just like to see the gaps. And I was like, I want to go the exact opposite. I want autonomous with payload because they can't do it. Can't have a bunch of little drones coming in. Maybe you could like think about a bunch of balloons, right? A bunch of balloons does not equal a dirigible, right? That's different. A Zeppelin is different than a bunch of balloons you get with helium in them, right? And so as drone warfare is very real, right? But somebody's got to do physical things that have some mass, and that's us. And we have the commercial use case where you can go pay some money and fly it around. So it's like a dual use investment. And I just loved it. I was like, I can see the government side. So we have government contracts around the stuff I talked about. And then we have people like you and I going down and paying $300 and flying around without having to be a pilot. Super cool, right?
Very, very cool. So tell me, you're in the venture capital space. So people come looking for money, entrepreneurs. You've been an entrepreneur. What's the worst pitch that you've ever gotten? And what advice would you give people coming to you or any venture capital professional money to have their stuff together?
Oh my gosh. Worst pitch. Had a lot of bad pitches. That's really, over time, that's gotten to be less and less. When we first started, it was kind of like we wanted to be nice. We're a new firm and people would just waltz in. It could be, I've got a granola bar, I've got some AI thing, I've got this and that. We're very focused, right? Like we know what we're looking for. We know the problems we think that need to be solved. We've built businesses, so we're not academic. I think most VCs are actually academic, right? They're really good at financing. They're good at
Right.
they're financial sort of market people, but they haven't really run companies, right? So like we've kind of done it all. And so we're looking for, all right, how? It's not the what and the why. Like any smart person's like, well, here's the trade we should make, or we need some of these companies. Right on. Who's going to do it? And what's the plan? Show me the people in the plan. Right. And so like, that's because we're operators turned investors and we spend a lot of time there. But the worst ones, I would say, the other day, it's at the space symposium. I mean, people that have raised a ton of money, very charismatic. It's selling, right? Fundraising is in many sense selling. They'll highlight, here's how much money we've raised. Here's who else is in. And it starter sounds like that. Look at all this money
Yeah.
I've got
That's
and
like
look at all these other
social.
people that are in. And I'm like, I'm not your guy. Let's talk. If you're not willing to talk about the how, and then just ask, like, you remember that show Columbo, where that like smart guy'd walk in, like, like, so tell me. And I usually turn my Texas Southern draw on, especially if I'm in like New York or San Francisco. And I'm like, I'm just like this Texas Army guy. Like, like, why does your customer care about that? Or how are you going to do that? And then within like 3 or 4 whys, the whole thing becomes a giant you know, um, exercise in obfuscation and mystery and shrouded in confusion.
I remember meeting Madoff, and that was the Madoff thing. Like everybody everybody was with them, and he was like the Jewish bond that always gave 12% a year no matter what. It's like, well, no, like explain it to
Yes.
me. If you can't no,
Yes.
it's not for me. You can't explain it. Sorry.
Charlie, you appreciate this because you're a team guy, right? The military teaches you this, and I mean, look what you did with R360. I mean, you're a we guy. Like you just
Yeah.
you create gravity where you go, right? And people that are like me, and they don't think about the we or they don't talk about the we. Nothing great happens without a we. So it's like me, and all they talk about is how they win. I
You're
win here. I did this. It's like the highlight reel. And I'm like, where did you not win? Like, tell me
where
about the stuff that didn't work. Because if you're not winning, if you didn't
yep.
lose, one, you're either delusional or you're not trying hard enough. I don't know which one it is. Maybe both,
Yeah.
right?
And I always tell my team, like, today on TV, R360 was on TV because with Barbara Goodstein. She used to run Tiger 21. She's the face. I'm not the face. My number is US 028, you know? Michael Cole's a great guy and he's doing amazing stuff. And, we're a partnership. And last thing I want is like to be the front guy. It's like, yeah, I got the whole thing started, but now it's kind of has a life of its own. But I wanted to ask, something that's on the mind of a lot of young kids that I talk to. A 16-year-old girl in high school is listening right now, and she wants to be on the right side of the AI economy in 10 years. What do you advise her to do now?
Wow. So that's interesting. One, I love that the 16-year-old, young gal is thinking that. Um, 10 years is like an eon in AI.
Maybe 3 years,
I mean,
probably.
yeah, I would condense that. I mean, it's really hard because we're like, what? So this real quick, like any new innovation stacks upon the innovation that's already there, right? So like the train could come because of the steam engine, and then after that the car, and so. But right now, this sort of step function we're used to is this. It's just compounding. I mean, AI is compounding so fast that to have I don't think anybody, there's no one out there who can call with any fidelity 10 years from now. Impossible. That person is absolutely no.
I'm interviewing John Marshall's had $2 billion exit. Software engineer, Georgia Tech. He's a Miami R360 member, and he put 100 million to start an AI company. First time he's ever started a company without a competitive advantage. And I don't know if he regrets it now or not 3 years later, but in February, we were like, hey, can we set up like the Q&A and what we're going to talk about at the conference in May? And he said, Charlie, 2.5 months in AI is a lifetime. I think we better
It's
talk
true.
about
It's true. It's true.
2 weeks.
It's true.
In fact, let's talk a week before the conference and I'll tell you what is going on. It's going to be totally different. And it's true. The stuff that's changed in 2.5 months is nuts.
So that for that gal, I'm trying to think like, how to bring all this back to your audience and sort of some practicality around what they would do and where their curiosities would go. So, I mean, if you even look at my portfolio, right? Like the pawn shops is a good example. We talked about history, sci-fi. Like I just think in barbells. I think in
Right.
barbells and then come back to the middle. Think in barbells, and my networks are there. I'm always trying to run and build more relationships with these two opposing worlds, right? The past and the future, and live in between them. So I think if you look at my AI book, data privacy and compute, that's where I'm at, right? I'm not picking LLMs. I am there. That's my thing. And then nothing, and then stuff AI can't do. So I would actually encourage that young woman, especially when it's so confusing in the future. If you're not in this like what's next level of like super smart, brilliant, technical folks, right? That's a true microcosm of that stuff. And that's also a lot of noise is going there, a lot of money's going there. For the average 16-year-old, I would focus on the stuff that AI can't do or it can't do today. You
Right.
can't go wrong with understanding the things that I just love stuff that is not at least apparently easy for AI to do yet, because there's safety and
Yeah.
power in that, especially if it's important. So like go back to Maslow, right? Like if we all need it, place to live, food to eat, clothes on your back, safety, whatever. Do that, in a way where AI can't do it, because AI will come in and help the components of it on an organizational level get better. But as things evolve, if she's really good at understanding things that we all need, and then also technical, become technical. Do not just be financial or pattern matching or smart. Like learn, play around with AI. Start being technical. Run with technical friends. You can do it now. Like I just invested in an AI boot camp training group, right? Because I had so many friends asking me like, hey, what are you guys
Yeah.
doing? How do I learn this? And I'm like, this reminds me of those like coding academies, or remember the old DeVry ITT days, or even like
Hey,
the Berlitz language people. Like I need to have conversational fluency on
I,
Portuguese because I'm going to Brazil.
yes,
Same thing for AI.
I'm, I'm doing 1 hour AI training classes for our 360 members. Today, I got a guy. He used to be in your group, Dean Sievers. He's in DC now, but he graduated #1 at Stanford. And, he wants to like get into AI. Like, what do you start? What do you do? So there's a huge need there. But going back to the 16-year-old girl, she probably has a boyfriend that is playing games all day online, sneaky games, went
Yeah.
public. Most gaming bets die. What did you see early that no one else did to make you invest?
Well, so I wouldn't say no one else did. There was only a couple of us. So we were one of multiple companies, but we were one of the top studios in the world at the time. What we saw is it's funny, you're asking all these questions, but it has this like non-sexy hidden in plain sight. There's always a hidden in plain sight thing.
That's like, the famous English detective. Like, just some people can see patterns. You're like the Sherlock Holmes of venture capital. So what is it that, like, what are the things that you observe?
So I'll tell you. So again, we were in Austin. So I wasn't in New York and I wasn't in San Francisco. And I'm hanging out at this place called the Hula Hut. And there's a coffee shop there called Mozart's. And that's where every tech CEO used to hang out 25 years ago, right? Because it wasn't a big town. And we would go there and be like, hey, I've got Benchmark or Kleiner Perkins coming to town. They want to have 3 meetings. They want to meet you. Or I just
Right.
interviewed 10 chief marketing officers. I hired this one because I'm channel and you're direct. And so here's somebody else. So we would just collaborate. Like we had boats together. It was a we, right? A we in a community trying to level up, just like R360, right? And reminds me a lot of the early days of that. And so we have technical people, less technical people, business people, whatever. We're on our Blackberries. We used to call them crackberries, right? And remember when the phone was literally just a phone, it was a phone, communication device only, and it was just now mobile. And then came a little bit of memory and a browser and SMS. And we're sitting there and saying, just like we're having about this AI and drones, we're sitting there with a bunch of entrepreneurs in Texas that at the time had a very heavy Dell. So there were some hardware
Right.
people,
Right.
right? And there was a lot of semiconductor people. And semiconductors went like way out of favor. Now they're back on like crazy, right? Because of chips. But we're sitting around and we're saying, over margaritas, right? What's the next thing? So what's next? What's next? And if these dominoes start falling, what's next? And very quickly we all said, well, people are going to do what they always do, which is conduct commerce and have fun. Full stop. Like if the phone is really a PC in my pocket, that's the question we said. If the phone is a PC in your pocket, what 2 things will absolutely rip? And it was e-commerce and the browser and all that sort of shopping. In fact, one of my friends took his company public, and in their S1 filing is like a risk disclosure. He had one of the first ISPs, right? The internet service providers.
Right.
And it was the internet as a viable medium of commerce. Like Wall Street, like put that front and center, like people may or may not actually buy things. And he's
Right.
got it like framed in his office, right? It's like, well, now we
Right.
know how that went. But when we said that, we said, well, if they're going to play games, we should have a gaming company because we have to go home and either get in your console or get into your browser and play like the old PC games. We want to get in the gaming side because Austin also had a couple of gaming veterans there. Like Richard Garrett was there, NC Soft was there, BioWare. There were some gaming people, right? I mean, Ready Player One was written by Ernie, right? You know, he's there in Austin. That was a great movie. I mean, that was way ahead of the curve, that Ready Player
Yeah.
One book. But so anyhow, we said, let's get into gaming in our studio. So there was Zynga, which is a well-known company. They were the California version of us. It was like 5 companies. We did it in Austin and we had raised a lot less money. We had a lot fewer people. We just got stuff done. And it was driving the world crazy because they would publish every day the top 10 social games, right? And the studios behind them. And we had 1, if not 2 in there at all times. And everybody else had raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. And we raised less than 3. We were just kicking their ass, right? Like, and people couldn't understand it, but we knew what we were doing and we were doing it outside of the echo chamber. And what we did that was really, really cool is we created, it kind of reminds me of the pawn shops in many ways. We created the first synchronous, asynchronous way to play games. So what that means is, if you remember Facebook, right? So we had
Yeah.
like MySpace, and there was High Five, there was all these different
Yeah.
social networks. But then Facebook said the same thing. Hey, when people come here, they're going to communicate, they're going to shop, they're going to play around, they're going to gift, right? And so we all played those games, and that was largely we were on there too, but Zynga was a pretty big player in there. And so, but you had to be in on your computer, right? Computer or, desktop or PC, computer, and you had to be in Facebook for you to keep, the clothes, your friends, the money, the virtual goods you had. And if you went and downloaded the app because they all wanted to be where you are.
Right,
Every
right.
company wants to be in your pocket on your device. So they're like, hey, for those customers that aren't behind their desktop, let's create the Facebook app and they can maybe play some games in there. But what you did over here while you're waiting in line at the post office or whatever, right, or on the subway, you get to level 3, you change your skin, you find new friends, you go over here. That didn't talk. And one thing that we know about humans is humans hate sunk cost. We hate lost time, lost sunk costs. So if I spent 30 minutes over here doing something and I logged in over here and I'd spent 5 hours in those two things, I'm pissed off. In my brain, I'm not happy and I'm pissed off. And we said, you can now play anywhere and everything's portable. Wherever you are, whatever device you're on, you never go backwards, you only go forwards. And that, yeah, it was very unique. Disney tried to buy us. We had multiple acquisition offers and ended up taking it public. It was awesome. $3 million. People raised hundreds of millions, and I was preferred and common. So I was a co-founder. So I had my common,
Right.
and then I had my preferred, which was like getting the liquidation and all that kind of stuff. When you get a registered company, you got to have the stock's different, right? But I was out there collaring, doing derivatives, selling. It was killer, man.
Well, look, you've talked a lot about Austin. You're in Colorado now, but you've called Austin the highest VC density per capita in America. And is it still true in 2026, or did Oracle leaving and the Tesla layoffs kind of break the spell? And are you still getting a big exodus from California to Austin?
In some ways, I mean, the billionaire tax thing is driving a certain demographic in. I think what we're not seeing as much of is like the COVID massive spike, where the typical kind of tech worker, director to VP, maybe C-suite-ish level, that larger torso of an organization was like, I'm out of here. It's, California's expensive. We got the homeless people thing, Austin, Nashville, Denver. There were certain Boise, there were certain markets that just blew up, right? But now COVID's in, at least for now, I think it'll come back, but there's a rear view mirror. People are like, back in office, butts in seats. There's a kind of come to work thing. And so a lot of those folks are kind of going back, or they're not coming to these markets that really got the COVID lift, but the billionaires are coming. So the people that are coming to Austin are a different demographic right now. From that, for a lot of it's that billionaire tax thing. But the other thing too is that every market's different. I mean, I'm in Colorado right now very deliberately. Like, we still have our
Right.
place in Austin, but we already laid the infrastructure. We were there before all these other people came. We've got the network. We've had success. We kind of dial it in. And for me, you always want to be growing, right? And what happened is the Rocky Mountains have a massive gap. There was a big firm up here that I'm friends with, the founders of it, out of Boulder, and they were like a 25-year-old firm, 4 partners, and they sunset, meaning they said, hey, I'm going to be a professor. I'm writing a book. I'm going to learn how to fly. So they kind of hung it up. And in the military, we call that a power gap, right? Or a power vacuum. And so it's like, hey, the king's gone, the dictator's gone. Who's going to kind of come in? And he's like, look, you already did this in Texas. Like, you're OG, you're successful, you're long, and you're the established incumbent. You're already in the Rockies. You've got portfolio companies there. You're doing space defense stuff. You're doing AI stuff. You got a house there. Why don't you come in and just run the Rocky Mountain play like you did in Texas? And there's not as many people here, right? So it really is like the Rockies are almost like an equal to Texas. You couldn't just do like Utah only or Colorado. It's not enough. So I'm just running the same play, across Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming, right? And to some extent, Montana, getting all the ingredients together to like have that. And then what we have now is from Canada to Mexico, Central Mountain Time Zone, fiefdom. If it's in our zone, if it's interesting, if it needs venture capital, I've got the operators, I've got the investors, I've got the co-investors. And from a quality of life, back to how you started initially, for my kids in Myrna, we get to now be where the weather's good. We always want to be where the weather's nice, where there's interesting people, and there's something compelling to do. And so it works.
You collect rare North American minerals and gems. Like, where did that start? And what's the rarest piece that you own, or your favorite?
Well, I sold the rarest piece a couple of months ago. That's a fun hobby. My wife doesn't necessarily love it so much because it looks like I'm buying expensive rocks you can't wear is how she sees it, right? It was truly, that'd be a little different. She'd be all over it. But I had a piece of kunzite. So a lot of the U.S. mines have been closed, right? Like they've been not in my backyard. So there's certain, I like North American stuff. One, because it's like a piece of history, but a lot of those mines are shut, right? Like mining is not necessarily so favorable. So I have a piece of kunzite, and it was owned by J.P. Morgan. So Mr.
Wow.
Coons got it, Dr. Coons. Then so the lineage was J.P. Morgan, Mr. Tiffany, J.P. Morgan, the Louvre, me. And
Wow.
so I had that, and it was on display in the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And then the curator is a friend of mine down there. And I was like, hey, I've got kids now. I've got some money tied up in this stuff. And so he sold it for me. And I've co-invested with like Christie's. I know the Christie's folks pretty well and talked to their sort of gem. And the other thing too is like space is interesting, right? So I also like meteorites, things from astro, because it's rocks, but it's also like a chapter of history too. So my kids like meteorites. We have a little collection of that.
Okay, now let me show you.
What
Here
you
the
got
beat.
back there? Yeah.
I got this in Colorado at one of those shows. This is one of my favorites. Look at that.
Ooh, that's really nice.
That's so I love the quartz and the stones and stuff. But the other little side note, rabbit hole curiosity I had to ask you is like your favorite superhero, Captain Picard with Iron Man on bad days. Explain the Picard pick. Tell me it's not because he's bald.
Well, yeah, no, the bald thing. So, right, for me, I always liked, it's so funny, man. I've always loved Professor X, right? Like the Captain Picard guy, because he's like you, right? One, he's a we, and the guy's literally in a wheelchair. So like everybody's like, oh, the strongest, the fastest. I'm like, that will fatigue. We all get older. We're gonna you're gonna get weaker and old. That's just, I mean, hopefully longevity and all the R360 stuff helps us in that journey.
Right.
But I loved um Professor Xavier because he was super smart, super powerful, and he went out and formed that school. And he was trying to be a we and be a force for making a difference for other people that were
Right.
mutants and misfits, right? I just loved everything about that, right? And
I
he
love
was
that.
surrounded by people that were stronger and faster and could fly. And he's like, look, I play my role and I'm doing this. And then Iron Man, I love too, because, you know, he wasn't like this unbelievable freak. And he was a smart guy. He was a builder. He was an engineer, smart guy that was rich, and he made himself a superhero. He was a smart guy with resources. I mean, Iron Man under Tony Stark is just a dude. He's a dude
Yeah.
like you and me, but he invented the technology to make himself one of the Avengers and a formidable superhero. He wasn't some guy from an alien planet. He wasn't a god. He wasn't like exposed to radioactive something that transformed his DNA. He was just a smart dude with resources. Boom. Love it.
Wow. Speaking of that, I was impressed that you're the first alumni of your MBA program to start an endowment for future entrepreneurs, and you wrote a check before you even really had a lot of money. Why'd you do that?
Just because there's people out there that were kind of like me, or maybe not even like me, but I wanted to have a way for someone who wanted to go do case studies and learn from practitioners and go be an entrepreneur. I think entrepreneur is the ultimate lever, right? I mean, that's a lot of, like you talked about China and different things earlier. Like that is a superpower. Like in the military, it'd be called key terrain. Like, is it the choke point? Is it the rivers or the mountain? Our key terrain in the United States is a DNA of doers and innovators. That's it. Bias towards action, heterogeneous. Homogeny is not good for us. So if we can stay heterogeneous, if we can be self-motivated, and if we can be entrepreneurs as a society, that is formidable. And so all I know is there's other people out there, because it's been good for me. It's changed my life being an entrepreneur. And I wanted to not have, I don't have the money be an excuse for them not to be able to be an entrepreneur.
And let me ask, if some kid listening right now has the same fire in their belly as you did at 14, but they have no money, no connections, would you advise them to consider doing 4 years in the military?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're going to get a couple of things out of it, right? I mean, it's a very, if you're that age, you're like, well, I need some money. Well, they're going to pay you. It's a job, right? I want to learn some stuff. You're going to learn some stuff, and I want to meet some interesting people. We're going to do that, and I want to go to places I've never been. You're going to do that, and I want to like grow. I want to grow as an individual. You're going to get all five of them. You're going to grow. All five of those will happen for you if you're in the military with the right mindset.
My first day, at the academy, my roommate was Cecil Alphonsus Grant, African American, recruited for football, and we became fast friends. Met his parents. It's like a melting pot. Like you have to be able to deal with people from all races, backgrounds, and you have to learn to follow and to lead.
Totally. That
You
was one of
know,
my favorite things about, when I was going, doing part of my training. We had a guy called Big Country. That was his nickname. Because we just know our
right?
last names, right? You kind of, is what you see. And so we had Big Country, who like literally was like, grew up like that, coal miner's daughter, sissy spacek, like barefoot running around, leaky roof in the shack, right? Mensa guy, super smart, super strong. We had an Astor, right? So I didn't even know what that was because I didn't come from that. But like if you're in New England, whew, you knew like Astor, right? We had another guy, Shaw, right? So he was awesome. Deep South, African American, drove a truck, listened to country music, loved hunting squirrels, like, Mensa as well. So like here we have like legacy family, old school family office money. We've got like big O Appalachian white guy. We've got deep South Southern African American guy. And guess what? We all bleed red. We're all back to back. We're solving problems, hanging out. Like that would have never happened in my traditional academic, cohorted, like-minded path, right? Just like you said with your buddy from school, totally, from the academy.
Right. So I want to finish with a couple of questions. You're the oldest of 8 kids. What did your parents do right that everyone today is getting wrong?
I don't know how much of it was intentionality and how much of it was just circumstance, but they both worked. One is that they had a lot of kids, and so we're always a we. So there was a sharing mentality. So there was
Right.
always an appreciation for anything you had, because we didn't have much and it was never always yours. So I think that this sort of anchoring in gratitude and just being, whatever food we had to eat, we were thankful for it. If we loaded into the van, a station wagon, and camped out, we were happy for it. We weren't entitled. There was no entitlement, right? And when Dad would fly to international places, we'd stay in the Marriott and we'd destroy the buffet. Like those hotels were like, oh, all you can eat for kids under 12. And we're like, mistake, right? We were just going there and like do all
Right.
that. Then it was like Caddyshack. We'd all jump in the pool and go crazy, right? But I think there was always an anchored in gratitude and appreciation, and then we were always a we, right? And those two things, like coming from a mindset of gratitude and thinking like a we, um, has just have been phenomenal attributes that are just core to like who I am and the journey that life has provided me. And I think the other thing too is they were very supportive. Like we were very into reading, right? Like my mom and dad were big readers. My mom loved the
Mm.
arts. So like symphony, ballet, musicals, all that stuff. So we grew up in a home of music and art and like right brain. My dad's very, right. My mom's very left brain. So there's
Did
very
you play any instruments growing up or anything musical?
little bit. I played piano a little bit, trombone a little bit. I got into DJing actually. Well, one, because I wanted to make
Very
some
cool.
money. So I was like, well, how do I make money with music? And I was spinning down in Houston, getting paid $300 in cash as a 16-year-old, but I think that was also really good too, is like music, reading. And then if we wanted to do something, my parents were like, great, what's your plan? So that business at 14, like everything was like, nothing was impossible. It wasn't like, nah, we're not wealthy enough, or you might not be smart enough, or we can't support you in that. It's like, that's a phenomenal idea. How are you going to do it? Don't ask us for any help. We're here to support you. How are you going to do it? Love it. Great idea. And so there was always this bias towards you could do anything. And what was your plan to go figure it out? And your family is here for any and all support except for monetary.
So, two more questions. One is, are there any books that you've read that have been particularly helpful in your life that you would recommend to others, either frame of mind, entrepreneurship, business, life, anything jump out at you? Or are there podcasts or other stuff that you listen to that you recommend to other people?
So many different books for so many different kinds of things, or contents or different content. I mean, if I had to like short set it down to like,
Yeah.
a backpack with, I'm trying to contain, I like to create constraints. Like
Right.
you got your,
Right.
where's your go bag? What's in your go bag? Right.
That's true.
um, all right. So I would say that I really like, Against the Gods.
Hmm.
I just think that's an amazing intellectual journey through time and history and, risk and reward and what's real and calculated and what's mystery, and maybe mystery is just something that hasn't been explained yet. I think that my kids, if you ask either one of my boys, they're like, magic is just science. You can't, that hasn't been explained yet. Like that's how
Right.
they really think about it, and I
Wow.
love that. I think that's one. I do like. The Richest Man in Babylon was a book that my dad
Ooh,
read to our
love it.
family when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
it's really, really kind of funny. Like my dad was a bishop in his church, and we're kind of a religious family too. And I remember being like 12, and he read our family every night. We'd read The Richest
Yeah.
Man in Babylon, right? And then we'd sing a song, play some music, and kind of give him a high five and go to bed. So it was like a little ritual. That was an interesting way to think about things as a kid. I
Yeah.
don't even know if that's a prominent book anymore, but it was.
It is.
I remember it.
Every Saturday for my Substack, I review 3 books, and that was one of them. So people
Oh,
loved
wow,
it.
cool. I
Yeah.
haven't even thought about it. It's funny, I mean, I haven't thought about that book in 40 years, but you just asked, and I'm thinking about that go bag.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
other one is really funny. I would say it'd either be, a tie between the Boy Scout Handbook and, the Infantry Field Guide, right? Like, probably the Boy Scout Handbook, because in that, I mean, I was a scout. It's kind of sad that scouts isn't what it once was to
I
me. It was
know.
such a huge thing, but in there you got life skills and nature and personal skills and interpersonal skills and knowledge about governments and history. And like, I think there's just so much. I mean, anytime I find an Eagle Scout, that goes straight to the top of my resume list, regardless of their background,
I
right?
I was a scout. I was on the board of the Scouts, and I was 3 years on the national board of the Girl Scouts. 30 board members, 2 men. I was one of them because my daughters had been Girl Scouts, and I just think it's a great leadership training, program. Plus, they're the 4th largest cookie company in the United States. I thought that was cool. So, most people don't think about that, but I'm not a big sci-fi guy, but if you were gonna recommend like, I recently got into, like, Dune, but if you were gonna recommend, like, one sci-fi book that would, like, get me excited to read the next one, where would you tell me to start?
Starship Troopers is pretty good. Um, Journey to the Center of the Earth is pretty good. We're reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea right now with my kids. I have to funny, I have to because there's some big words. So I have to read and then translate with
Right.
synonyms along the way. I mean, that's a good. I mean,
Starship Troopers came to mind first. What's that about?
so I mean that one's, it's the future and there's different citizens. So I like these kind of ones where like you fast forward geoeconomics, you fast forward geopolitics. There could have been some you know, natural disaster type things. But, it's like, what do humans do? How do humans kind of get through it? And what's the social construct? And there's citizens and non citizens, right? And you can vote, have property, do things. And like, there's the elite class, and there's all these different books like that where there's like the elites and the
Right,
non-elites,
right,
and
right.
the K-shaped economy that's very real right now. But they also have to like serve. So if you serve in the military, it's a path towards being a citizen, and now you get a vote. And so anyway, I just kind of like that. And it's this group of friends, and they kind of get scattered out, and they have different jobs. There's right the jockey athlete guy. There's like the cerebral, gifted and talented guy.
I'm gonna read it. This is a book somebody asked me, like, one of my favorite books, and I read it a long time ago, so I just ordered another one, and, it's called Replay, and by a guy named Ken Grimwald, and it's this guy, he's burnt out, he's a media exec, he's like 43, he's married, has kids, and he dies, heart attack. But he wakes up at the age of 21 in his college dorm room, and he remembers everything that's going to happen in the future.
Oh,
So
wow.
it is. So I think the first thing he did is he went to like Vegas because he knew he was going to win the Super Bowl and the World Series, and he becomes really rich and like. But then he gets to 43 again and he dies, and he goes back, and it keeps happening, and then he has to decide what the hell, like, I don't want to live that life again of debauchery. I want to, and then he figures out later about his fourth time that there's like the Elon Musks of the world that, yeah, those guys have to be like me. You can't just be that smart like an Elon Musk. You must be one. And then he got them together, and it was almost like an Atlas Shrugged kind of thing. But anyway, last question. You've been a soldier, an operator, a founder, an investor. What is the one question I should have asked, but I didn't ask that you wanted to answer?
The one question. Um, what, well, I guess, what can I not do or influence that I wish I could, right? Like, I don't try and live in a world of regrets. I try and live in a world of learning. And I know
Yep.
kind of what I'm good at and kind of where I have influence. But I also have some things out there that I really am passionate about where I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I don't really know how to get it done, but somebody needs to do it, and it's important to me. We really care about, like, I think the the world, the weather, and the population, that is very, very real stuff. And I'm investing, I'm trying to help, whatever. But like, I wish that I had the ability to, in a more direct and meaningful way, beyond what we can do as a household, somehow slow down or curtail um, global warming, and the lack of fresh water. Those two things are going to affect so many things. And so I have a whole investment philosophy around like all the derivative activities, but it's
Right.
just sad, right? Like, I don't want to end up in one of those with our grandchildren being in that dystopian sci-fi future. Right. And I don't have the direct capabilities to, in my opinion, make a meaningful impact on something that is of very significant magnitude for me and my family. And that's frustrating as a father and as a husband, to have this external thing there that is a threat that you can't mute or you can't impede, right?
Well, maybe AI will help us solve it instead of colluding to exterminate us in the future. But
True.
I'm, a, I'm an eternal optimist, so I think of AI as a tool. Having said that, there's some R360 members who have created entire companies with like 100 employees that are actually AI agents working 24/7. They don't complain. They don't need healthcare,
Yep.
and they actually execute and make decisions, which blows me away. So I'm gonna go uh, to Europe in June, and I'm gonna take July off, but I want to go see this guy's company. I call him Da Vinci. He's a medical doctor, but he's a software engineer, and he started with one nursing home, ended up with 1,500 at the age of 37, exited, and now
Wow.
he's seeing the negative effect that private equity is having on the healthcare system, where they only care about dollars and not about patient outcomes. So he wants to change that, because what he actually did with those 1,500 nursing homes is that he gave much higher care at lower cost, and everybody else had to change the way they were doing things to compete. So he's trying to now use AI to, I'm not sure what he's doing, but whatever he's doing, I'm sure it's interesting. And I love people like you, Chris, you're on the forefront of the future, space, flying cars. I mean, it's like, I think that one day I'm going to live forever because there's going to be a hologram with everything I've ever written and said in AI, and my grandkids are going to go to my hologram and say, "Hey, Grandpa Charlie, I need some advice." And in my voice, it's going to basically say the same thing that I would have said.
Have you read Ready Player One? Do you know that book?
No. What's
You
it
should check
called?
it's a sci-fi book too, Ready Player One. But
Ready
there's a
Player
character in there
One.
called the Curator. That's what you're talking about. It's like
Okay.
this hologram. Imagine like a librarian. That's you and everything that you knew and all of your relationships that your grandkids could go in and be like, tell me about what Grandpa Charlie was like at 17 or whatever. And they pull up the archives and you can watch the videos of your life.
Wow.
It's cool.
Wow, yeah. Ernest Cline. So I just bought it. It'll give me something to read.
He's an Austin guy too. He's OG Austin. Ernie, yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much. This was awesome. I haven't seen you for a while, but hopefully we can break bread together one of these days soon.
I'd love that. Congratulations on everything you're doing. It's just awesome to watch their influence you have continue to scale and permeate. It's great.